Hey everyone, it's me, Kaylin. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about how I see America differently after 14 years of living abroad in Namibia. And for those of you who don't know, I am a Black American that first moved to Namibia in 2010. I'm on South African Airways, going to Namibia now. So we're in Johannesburg, South Africa. You can see the workers down there and the planes in the distance. I still live here. I'm now married to a Namibian national. We have 2 kids together and 2 dogs, and I am from New York. So the first thing that stands out to me is that I feel like Americans stress a lot over service disruptions. And I am actually still this way, but I'm just not as bad as I used to be. But whenever there is a natural disaster that impacts electricity, internet, water, I see people on social media panicking, Americans panicking. And this is not obviously about when it really is endangering someone's life, like elderly people or people that are ill and need to be on machines and things like that, because that is obviously a very big, major inconvenience. But just people that they still have their house, they still have their health, but the internet is out, the power is out. And I feel like here, people cope a lot better with those types of disruptions. Do they find it to be an inconvenience? Yes, they do. However, I think I, for one, have kind of absorbed a bit of the culture here of not panicking. It's not the worst thing in the world, and having a lot more patience. Things are not always going to get fixed right away. You can survive without electricity unless you need it for medical reasons or something like that, but you can survive. You can use a match and a candle. You can absolutely survive without internet. Life will go on. So it's been a lessons in patience, and I have built a lot more patience from dealing with those things that do happen a lot more frequently here. And even, for example, if there's going to be a water outage, like when I first moved here and I was living in a rural area and we had a really bad rainy season that was tripping up all sorts of systems. And as a result, we would get frequent power and water outages. And so I just started saving water the night before I had to be at work the next morning because I was teaching at a school. You know, there are ways to be flexible. If it's the summer season, then you don't have air conditioner, you don't have a fan, but it's not the end of the world, you know? Like it's like I sometimes think that we are not that comfortable with inconvenience. And that's debatable as to whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Some people might say maybe people here need to be more demanding. I feel like Americans need to be less demanding and a bit more flexible. But that's one thing, one major thing that I've noticed after living here for all these years, just the cultural difference in terms of coping with inconvenience. American culture is very, very urgent compared to Namibian culture, which is much more relaxed. Americans, we are an urgent, timeliness-based culture. We want things done yesterday. We don't have patience. If I called you and you're going to fix this, then it needs to be done when you say it's going to be done. If we have an appointment at 3:30, you need to be there by 3:15, right? If you have an assignment, you should probably turn it into your boss yesterday, not the day that it's due. You know, like that's the culture of American society. And for me, I come from New York and everything is very fast paced, very rushy. Here, if it's a holiday weekend or it's a Friday, it's not uncommon to go to a particular office, could be a government office, and people have taken off early because it's a holiday weekend. That is pretty normal. And I used to find it very frustrating, like when things leading up to a weekend or a holiday would close early or just not be able to be done because people have sort of taken off a little bit early for the weekend. I used to find it really frustrating. And I used to find that culture that people talk about, African time, of like not always being on time, I used to find that frustrating. But to be honest, now it's really refreshing to not have that pressure cooker like type of American timeliness that is on your back. Rush. Why aren't you there? Why aren't you there? It's really refreshing to be in a more relaxed culture. And it makes you really question, what is so important about timeliness? Why does it have to be this way? You know, you start just thinking about things at a bit deeper level and analyzing what you may have grown up to think was the way, and realizing that there are some benefits to things moving at a slower pace. A bit of a healthier work-life balance. People are able to turn their back on their job at a certain point and say, you know what, I'm going home, I'm going to enjoy my weekend. it's not even 5 o'clock, but peace. Whereas in the US, we are so diligent about staying until the last hour, until the last minute, because we have to. We don't have a choice. But there's not as much sneaking out and just saying it's been enough for this week or this day. And that's probably a good thing, because at the end of the day, you are breaking your neck for this job that if something happens to you, it's gonna keep going and you're gonna be where you are. And will you have enjoyed your life? Taking your job with a grain of salt, doing what you have to do, but not taking it so seriously that it's gonna take over your life. I really see, after living in Namibia for 14 years, whenever I go back home to New York, I see how we as Americans live in a society of overconsumption. That supersized culture, like when you go to a restaurant and the plate is like hugely filled with food, versus here where things are served in much smaller portions. The supermarkets here have so much less variety than in American supermarkets. Whenever I go home, I'm super overwhelmed by the massive amount of options that simply exist in the supermarket. It's almost like my eyes have to adjust to all the choices, and it's just overwhelming to make a choice, to make a selection. We are a society of, I think, too many choices, and I don't think it's always necessary. And with that, I think comes also a bit of wastefulness. Here, and I notice this with my husband, for example, if something's broken, people here are not so quick to throw it away. They might find a way to sell it, or really they might just find a way to try to fix it themselves, or find someone they know that can fix it, or take it apart and try to fix it. My husband will do that. He's not an electrician, but he will do that. People will really try and keep something until they get the last that they can get out of it before going to replace it or before going to buy a new one. There is a big culture of reusing here that, despite the recycling systems that we see in America, I still feel like things here get used a lot more over and over, and you really get your dime's worth, when you buy something here, than in America. We just quick to throw something away, and so that's a big difference I see, is just the culture of like overconsumption. And I think wastefulness, unfortunately, comes a lot with that in the US as well. One thing that I always notice is just the comparison of social services. I think American culture has way more social service resources and support for vulnerable populations like disabled or the elderly, people that are homeless, for example, abused women or victims of crimes, whereas here it just doesn't exist as much. There are social workers here, but there's just a lot less of support for people that are in difficult, vulnerable positions. I see, for example, they call them street children here, which are literally children on the street who are homeless, many times addicted to drugs, and they're begging for food, begging for money. It never gets old to me. It's always shocking. And I ask my husband, well, where can they go? Are there shelters here for them? Orphanages? And for the most part, there really isn't. In my town, for example, I don't live in the capital, but there's not much support for homeless children in my town. That's shocking, and it's scary. Even I hear a lot of stories here in Namibia about women who are abused going to report the crime, but then at the end of the day, they have to go right back home into their situation where they are absolutely exposed and vulnerable to their abuser knowing where they are and coming to get them. There aren't many women's shelters here. There aren't many homeless shelters. There definitely things of that nature. I remember when I was a volunteer back in 2011, I was teaching at a school, and there was a student there. She was severely physically disabled, which made it difficult for her to walk, to write, things like that. And she used to get swallowed up in the transition from class to class, like when the periods change. She would get just sort of swallowed up in the crowds of the students, and nobody helped her. There was nothing for that student. And I was just shocked by that, and I wondered, why isn't there more to accommodate her disability? Really, in that area, there weren't many, if any. There wasn't even one school for disabled children, and the school didn't have like a social worker or something like that was on the school property. Maybe she had a social worker out that worked somewhere else, but there hardly was anything done to accommodate her. She was on her own to fend for herself. We in the US, although it's not perfect, the social services system is absolutely far from perfect in America, but it is significantly more well-resourced, and there is a lot more support in the US than there is here for vulnerable populations. Another big thing here is that there is so much entrepreneurial opportunity here compared, I think, to the US, where the competition is so fierce and everything is sort of already, all the ideas are already sort of like snatched up and done. You know, it's like you really have to work hard to like make a dent as an entrepreneur in the US or find something unique. Everything has almost been thought of. Whereas here, particularly once you get outside of the bigger cities or outside of the capital city, there is so much entrepreneurial opportunity available. I see it everywhere. And I'm always like, wow, like that's an idea. That's an idea. There is a lot more entrepreneurial opportunity, I think, in the motherland on the continent of Africa than there is in the US. The educational system is something that I will always continually be fascinated by, the differences between there and here. In the US, students have a lot of autonomy, a lot of freedom. They can speak their mind. They know they can call the police on their parents if they want to, or on their principal or their teacher. Here, that is not the case. Students are really, I think, respectful in a different kind of way because of that. There is also corporal punishment that still exists here, which probably accounts for a lot of that respect, but also just the culture. Like there's even a big respect here for elders that is ingrained, I think, in young people here. And so it's not to say that American kids are worse than African kids, but there are some differences there. Here, the kids are like, yes, miss, no, miss, can I help you, miss? You know, it's more so of that. And there is not much of a talking back type of behavior. Although many Namibians that are older, I think they say, like, I've seen some of them say, oh, like kids back in my day, like the kids couldn't get away with this, or, you know, they didn't act like that. And I, you know, sometimes I want to say, wow, like to me, they actually are still Namibian because they're still highly well behaved. And if you guys saw the way kids in American school system where you would have your minds blown, but it's just very different in terms of the culture of school children, of the culture of students in schools. It is vastly different. One thing I notice is that Black American culture, we have a lot of influence. And I knew this before, but I see it even at a deeper level here in Namibia. Every day I see little aspects of my culture around me, from the stores that I'm in that sell shirts that say Harlem or Brooklyn on them, to people that know me greeting me. This doesn't happen often, but it has happened at least 3 or 4 times where someone comes up to me and they're like, what's up, my That's the influence of hip hop. Sometimes I'm driving around and I hear Brandy like playing a lot, like her songs like seem to be really popular. We have a lot of influence, and I love to see the blending of these two Black diasporas just merging. It's really nice. It's actually pretty comforting. It reminds me of home, and it's just nice to see little tidbits of my culture all the way here in Namibia. And the last thing is that no matter how long I'm here, there's no place like home. I moved here ready to shed my Americanness, and no matter how long I am here, I really haven't been able to do that. I am very much an American, and that's not really something that you can really just totally erase. You can't hide from it. It's always there. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Share your thoughts and experiences on experiencing other cultures and what you've noticed about theirs versus yours in the comments section, and I will talk to you guys soon. Till next time.